Joining me now on the latest edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show, the Knicks take on the Washington Wizards, and there are obviously some Knicks connections, whether it be the great Kristaps Porzingis, who will find out if he's actually going to be available for this game, and of course the fan favorite, the OG Taj Gibson, who going off the most recent game may end up starting this game for the Wizards. She covers the Wizards for the Washington Post. Her name is Ava Wallace. Ava, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this week they just came off playing the Bulls. They got the Knicks next. This is Taj Gibson's exes here.
Oh, wow. I didn't even put two and two together. Do they have the Timberwolves next week, or are we going to go flip through the whole
No, they've done the Timberwolves. I mean, okay. To go through Taj's whole, I mean, you're going back. He's a guy who, like, you walk into arenas and, like, the security people will be like, oh, my God, Taj Gibson. I remember him. And I'm just like, okay. Like, he's an old head.
Yeah, I just got done telling you that I rewatched. I watched for the first time the Bulls Wizards game from last night at time of recording last night. And while the offense was something to be desired, especially the fourth quarter offense, it was hard not to notice just Taj Gibson being involved in so many productive plays, good rotations, screens that were set, some getting his hand in on some loose balls. And it's like, oh, yeah, Taj, I remember this. This was really fun for a long time. Is that, if you just want to, we'll get the Taj stuff out of the way now. Has that been a common theme among Wizards fans, at least, that, oh, wow, Taj Gibson, good to have a vet like that on your team?
I think, yes, because that's what Wes Unseld Jr. will sing this guy's praises about. Just he's the veteran kind of stabilizer that we need. He knows so much. And Taj himself is just like the most wonderful person to deal with. He is always so happy. The thing after, whenever he has like even a minorly good game, he's saying, I'm just so happy to be around all these young guys and to hear all the young guys like cheering for me and calling my name. And he seems to really be aware of his career is coming to an end. And, he's 37. So he seems to really appreciate being on this team. So, yes, he's done really well for the Wizards. He was out a little bit recently, I believe, with a groin strain, and that's just from he had a really sharp uptick in minutes since they've kind of gone to this bigger lineup. He's been good for them. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing that they are leaning on him so much. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there where he has been really steady and he has, when he's called on, been able to kind of just go back to fundamentals. They have a lot of players who will get a little bit rushed or get disorganized and kind of forget what they have to do on defense. And Taj is always really stable on that. But, you don't want to be depending on Taj Gibson to be kind of like anchoring your defense as much as they do.
This is, I cannot tell you how familiar I find all of this, especially last season.
Bond here.
well, so like you had like Mitchell Robinson was in and out of the lineup for the Knicks last year. And when he was on the court, he was outstanding, but he was dealing with, I don't want to say a weight issue. He put on a ton of muscle the offseason prior, and he showed up just like at a different playing weight and almost had to play himself into the shape that he was the year before. So as a result, we saw a lot of Taj last season, and it was hard not to, like you said, notice all the good things he does as a savvy veteran, and then look at like, oh, we're getting 30 minutes of Taj Gibson, and that's why we're not going to the play. Well, not specifically why we're not going to the playoffs, but it's not a recipe that screams success. That does lead to the first place I wanted to go with talking about the Wizards, and it's just hard not to notice the injuries. Like you do see the 18-24 record, and obviously that losing streak in the middle of December, but it's also not a fully explainable thing with like Bradley Beal missing the time he has, Gafford missing the time, obviously Porzingis missing the time. But would you say, like, as far as vibes around the Wizards are concerned, or like the injury where we're just like bit by that bug this season?
Yeah, and not even it's not something that anybody waited until this season to start talking about either. Like general manager Tommy Shepard and coach Wes Unseld Jr., I think preseason, every coach says we just need to stay healthy and we'll be at our best. But they were like, that will be our key this year. Like, if we can keep guys on the floor, we think we'll be fine. And they kind of showed that during that 10-game stretch where they really did have just about everybody available. DeLon Wright came back, Rui Hachimura came back, and they looked pretty good. But like, it is to the point where you have to start wondering, like, what is going on with this team? Porzingis actually he's been pretty okay, especially for a guy that they use as much as he do and a guy with injury history that he has. He's been able to stay on the court for a while. Kuzma's been good. Bradley Beal has missed a lot of time, which is, of course, something you notice more after a guy signs a $250 million contract. You can't kind of keep that out of your mind. But it's just, Rui Hachimura missed weeks and weeks with a sprained ankle that revealed a bone bruise after he had an MRI. DeLon Wright had a long-term hamstring strain. Corey Kispert missed the start of the season because of an ankle sprain. Like, it's just, you can kind of talk about the density of games. You can talk about coming back. I don't think the narrative of like coming back from the pandemic exists anymore, but it's getting to the point where you're kind of like, what's going on here? Yeah, for sure.
So it was the Giannis 55-point game that Beal came back, played 13 minutes, and then had to shut it down again.
Yeah.
I guess if I could just go through them one by one for Friday night's game, I guess when people are listening to this, tonight's game, is there a chance we see? I know he was just recently cleared to practice, but is there a chance we see him Friday night?
I would be surprised. I don't think there's a 0% chance, but I would be surprised just given how they handled his hamstring before. So I think he was still out. I think it was still like a 6-game or maybe a 6-day, or a week-long period since he came back from the first hamstring strain. So in December, he had a right hamstring strain. Sorry, I keep messing that up. He missed a chunk of games for that. Came back, had left hamstring soreness. That's what you're talking about. He came back from, played 13 minutes, and then he re-aggravated the injury, turned into a strain. So I would have to think they've got to be really, really cautious, just because the first game he did try to come back from that soreness. It was when he had the strain. So I think he'll start practicing and start ramping up. But I would bet when he came back in that game that Giannis had 55, his minutes restriction was 32, which is hardly a restriction. So they thought he was good to go, basically. Okay. Comes back and second rotation in the second quarter, he tweaks something. So I would not be surprised if they're like really, really careful and we don't see him on Friday at all.
This may actually, that might more lead to, they play each other next Wednesday. So that there's a chance for that. That's a better question for then. But I would be lying if, as a Knicks fan, I'm not curious of the next guy I'm going to ask, and it's Kristaps Porzingis, who, look, we have a Patreon pod where we talk about the NBA at large, and we, a little over a month ago, did our All-Star, way too early All-Star ballots, just to look at the conversation, see where Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle would fall, and it was just hard not to notice how really good Kristaps Porzingis has been this year.
Yeah.
First question, do we see him? I know he's day-to-day, but do we see him Friday night?
It's tough to know because contusion bruises are really funky. Like if they're deep enough, they can really keep you. And especially a rib contusion, like that might, you get a little bit less trunk rotation, you get a little bit less movement, especially for a shooter. So that one, last night they didn't even kind of wait for game time. They were just like, this dude's out a couple of hours before the game. So once again, it's something he could come back from, but I'm always kind of inclined to, especially. Okay, what's making me biased is that he didn't play against Dallas this year. He had a random one game. I forget. We didn't see anything, and later Wes Unseld Jr. was like, "Oh no, that happened the game before," and we were kind of like, "Okay." But so I am totally letting that bias me. I know KP will want to play against the Knicks and everything like that, but it really could go either way. They didn't practice today either, so I'm not sure. It was kind of a get what you need day for them, and guys came in and got treatment and things like that. So I'll be interested to hear it shoot around tomorrow.
If he misses tomorrow, it's understandable more toward recovery. It'll be fascinating how next Wednesday goes when he's back in the Garden.
Oh, I think he'll definitely, I would be shocked that he misses that. He loves playing at the Garden. He loves playing at the Garden, man.
As he has said many a time, if anything, he wishes he still was playing at the Garden, but neither here nor there. I do want to at least discuss a little bit about how good he's been this season, and what have you heard from, seen obviously, but heard from him specifically? What's the biggest difference? I can't put it to it's as simple as I'm featured more not next to Luka. There has to be something different, at least for me. What have you heard and what have you seen?
It's not necessarily that he's not next to Luka, but it is more so that this offense was designed to let him and Beal cook. They're very purposefully giving him pretty much all the space he needs. Obviously, they're happy to use him and use him and use him. And so on court, he likes the offense that they're putting him in. He's liking the opportunities that Wes Unseld Jr. is giving him. He's kind of not being asked to do anything super crazy, even on the defensive end. I mean, in this big lineup, the whole point of him playing next to Daniel Gafford, that takes a lot of defensive weight off of his shoulders. He said after that Philly game, which I think was the second game after they debuted that starting lineup, we were like, how do you like the new group? He said, great. I don't have to guard Joel Embiid. This is my dream. Perfect. Wonderful. So I think they are kind of catering a little bit to him. We've been asking opposing coaches if the Wizards have been using him necessarily differently. And they're saying maybe he's getting a little bit more pick and pop. They are using him smartly in space, but mostly it's just the kind of the offense revolves around him and Beal. But the thing that he'll tell you, and he's kind of said since he got here and has grown a little bit more, I guess, passionate about, is he really loves being in DC. He likes this organization. The organization from ownership on down really values him and kind of how he goes about his business, which is generally pretty quiet. At least on the surface, what I see and what I've heard is he doesn't ask for all that much. He's your typical, number two on the call sheet. Like he basically asks for what he is worth is how it's been put to me. Which they appreciate, but he really likes being in the Eastern Conference, where the time difference back home is only 6 or 7 hours from Latvia. He did not like being in the West for that reason. It was hard to get in touch with his family. It's a little bit easier to travel around the Eastern Conference. DC, a lot of European players say this. I cover tennis a lot, and tennis players say this too, reminds people of European cities, I think because of all the monuments and like limestone. I'm not really sure. I'm from here. I don't have that many
that makes sense,
in European cities, but so he's just really happy on this team, really happy in this organization, likes the location. So I honestly think that's a really big part of it. And of course, it's a contract year for him. So
I never considered that the first of all, the DC correlations to other cities overseas.
Yeah, you think it's like an exaggeration, but it is like stunning how many people, athletes from all different sports, will say that first thing. It's very weird.
I'd be curious. Like, I know New York gets some of that because, like, I don't know if there's not
New York is New York.
That's the thing. New York, again, you're right. It's there's a different type of thing there. Yeah. So I'll ask you now about Daniel Gafford, and I'll just go down the list. Daniel Gafford, do we see him on Friday night?
Danny Gaff's got the ankle, right? Yeah. I could see. The thing about the Wizards is all of the injuries they've had this year, and Coach Wes Unseld Jr. has commented on this. You haven't seen a ton of guys pushing through injuries, and obviously, I'm not saying this is your job. Don't sacrifice your body. You sacrifice your body enough. Like, I'm not siding with owners or whatever here, but it is notable how many injuries they've had. And it'll be things like lower back soreness or a guy tweaked this. And you're kind of like, I don't know if it's just the fact that a team that's more in the hunt, you're seeing guys play through that stuff more, that it's January. So what's the point? But a lot of that stuff has kind of been obvious to the point where we asked Wes Unseld Jr. about it when Anthony Gill, the 15th guy on the roster, had an injury once, and we were like, hey, he's playing. And Wes Unseld Jr. was like, yeah, I wish more guys would do that. That's a good example that he's setting there.
Okay.
But for an ankle sprain, if it's not, we haven't got any news that it's like a crazy high sprain or if it's a really severe one. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gaff is back in the lineup. But again, if it's Gaff without KP, does he start? Like, how do they do you have to have both of them available and healthy to roll out that big lineup that they've been using? But they played without 3 starters the other day, and Corey Kispert, who's been starting in Beal's place, was working through some low back soreness of his own. So they're beaten up, man.
The big lineup you're talking about, that's with Kuzma playing the 3, basically,
yeah,
right?
He's at the 3, KP at the 4, and then Gafford's playing the 5.
Yeah, the East is big. Yes, what's funny, the Knicks, there's this Obi Toppin pipe dream that some fans have that he could play the 3. And hey, I found a lineup that actually might match up well against. This actually is a good segue. The idea that not that these injuries aren't serious, but that they're being held out longer because the team is where they are in the standings, currently 12th in the Eastern Conference. And the other part about their record that is noticeable is that it's 6th in the lottery standings. And look, I don't want to fully, like, I know these are professionals and like you're trying to win every game. I'm never going to accuse pros of like tanking, But it is, from an organizational standpoint, curious to not wonder what might happen over the next month. From your obviously your vantage point and the information you get in, what do you foresee happening if you had to take a guess over the next month as far as this team? Not a full teardown, but do we see them start to lean more toward players that might not give them the best chance to win?
Yeah, Tommy Shepard told me that's the general manager again, told me two really interesting things I thought at the start of the season when I was doing my preseason preview. And I asked him about the state of the roster, and he said, this is in no way our finished product. Like, that's going to be very in flux. We've already seen that with, like, I think they thought Johnny Davis, their number 10 overall draft pick, was going to be much more of a factor. They've brought in Jordan Goodwin instead. That's already kind of an element that's changed kind of right off the bat. But of course, the big thing that they have to decide on is Kyle Kuzma, who's come out front and said to me, he said to a million other reporters, that it would be really silly for him to engage in contract extension negotiations with the Wizards. He plans to test free agency. He knows what he's worth on the market. He thinks it's more than what he has now. So it would be silly for the Wizards to not trade him. So I do think big trades are coming just because their core guys, one of their core guys has come out and said, yeah, I got to test the market. And of course, the Wizards, if they chance keeping him and then letting him walk for nothing, would be really, really bad. So I think the trade deadline is going to be interesting. They're one of kind of a few teams that I feel like I can really pin down as definite sellers. They've got a lot of really good assets who would be attractive to other teams. Talking about guys like Denny Avdia, Rui Hachimura counts as one of those guys. Will Barton, who was a starter in Denver last season and has had, I asked him the other day about how his year's been with Wes Unseld Jr., a guy who he knows and has a great relationship with from Denver. And he said, it's been a really tough year for me. It's been a challenge kind of first moving to bench and trying to figure out my minutes. And then now obviously being fully out of the rotation, a year removed from being a starter on a playoff team. So they have really attractive guys to other teams. So I do kind of expect some major shakeups. I know the question on everybody's mind is like, are they going to trade Bradley Beal?
My only question towards that was like, how real is that? I'm sure with your conversations with Tommy Shepard, like, you'll know better than anybody. Is this even something they'd consider after giving him the extension that Beal isn't part of the long-term plans?
As far as I have heard, he is the foundation of their long-term plans. So that doesn't mean that he won't be traded or he won't ask out or anything like that in the future. But I would be, given the way that this team has pretty conservatively and slowly moved things in the past, I would be gobsmacked if Beal was gone this early. Yeah.
Basically, it would have to be initiated by the player. It's not like an organizational decision to.
No, the organization loves Bradley Beal, and they've made that very clear, and they'll say that till they're blue in the face, and that's why they gave him that contract this summer. And he's made a commitment to DC. So I especially with how injured he's been and everything that Bradley Beal has told us is he doesn't like evaluate. I don't think any player likes evaluating those seasons where they haven't been on the floor that much, but he's barely gotten a chance really with this team. He's played some games, but he hasn't gotten in a good rhythm this year at all. He had a bad bout of COVID, 2 extended injury breaks, strep throat at the beginning of the year. Like, it's not been a fair shake for him this year.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I wasn't intrigued by. Kuzma's not a backup, so like him coming to the Knicks is more. It has to be more a fairy tale than anything else. So I can't see there being a partner there. The only thing that does intrigue me is the pick protections this year. Now, like the Wizards just have to. I don't think it's worth the juice if it's like, hey, we'll give you your pick, control over your pick back because it's going to convert this year anyway.
Exactly.
But. I don't know. That's the only we've been getting in our mentions, the hypothetical, like Evan Fournier, Cam Reddish for Will Barton and Kyle Kuzma and your pick back. And I doubt that's something they would pursue. Is that fair?
I think you've got the right line of thinking there, from what I understand.
That's what I'm glad I'm on the right track there. Yeah. Okay. So as far as this game goes on Friday night, It's really going to come down to, I guess, who's playing. Because if Porzingis is unavailable, that then sets up I cannot believe this might be real. That Taj Gibson might start against Tom Thibodeau in a basketball game. But
Taj Gibson revenge game, man.
There you go.
That is such a weird story. Like, I cannot imagine writing that in a newspaper in the year 2023.
Well, so it's funny. Earlier in the year, when the Knicks were honestly still figuring out what's the best 9 or 10 guys that make the most sense, there was an Alec Burks revenge game. Now the Knicks won that game by 10, but or I guess they won that. You know what? They gonna reveal something about myself. They won that game by 7. I know this because Burks hit a meaningless layup at the end of the game that covered the point spread. So, and I want to talk about a bad beat. I remember that bad beat very well. I might be missing up the number specifically. I do remember the Alec Burks layup.
You remember the pain, though. It sounds
like you jerk. I can't believe that you did this. Awesome. I think it goes to because Burks has obviously been productive as a bench piece in Detroit, and Taj is showing his value somewhat in Washington. This is just kind of like these are the guys that come out of the Tibbs system. What is something I guess you're curious about going into Friday night's game as far as the Knicks Wizards matchup is concerned? The
last couple times these guys have played, Mitchell Robinson has absolutely killed them on the boards, and they've upped their rebounding, especially since they've been healthy, and the big lineup helps with that. But that's just something they haven't been able to get control of, and it kind of speaks to how they've been on defense against the Knicks. And they played the Knicks when they were kind of mired in those times when nothing was working for them on defense. They're up to 16th defensive rating in the league, I think, which sounds very mid, which it is, but for the Wizards, that's pretty good stuff. They've had a couple of weird games. They showed some spurts of it in the Bulls last night, but certainly not as much as they did against OKC in their past couple of games and against the Pelicans, where like these guys are just, especially with people out of the lineup, they cannot keep consistent defensive streaks alive. So I'm gonna be interested to see that, especially depending on who's missing and who's not, because like their offense might be good, but I'll be really interested to see how they handle Jalen Brunson. And I'm really interested to see how they defend Jalen Brunson. I'm excited to look at DeLon Wright against him. Monte Morris, I kind of can't figure out. The team is really happy with him, but also all they wanted out of point guard this year was to kind of someone to keep them organized and who could not be insane, basically. And Monte Morris is really good at that. But Wes Unseld has kind of been singing his praises on defense lately. So I'll be interested to see that matchup too, which is such a weird thing. Like, is that glamorous? I don't think so, but whatever. I'll be watching it. It's how they guard potential all-star.
Exactly. It's glamorous enough for me, at least.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning the Randall, I guess, Taj Gibson matchup as well, and seeing how that works. You're right about. So correct me, or I guess inform me on Avdija. Help me say it. Avdia. Okay. Yeah,
the J is a Y.
He had like 19 rebounds, 18 rebounds last night.
Yeah. He's had an up and down season like that, where it's like Demi for them has a lot of potential. The team really, really believes in his ceiling. And he just can't, he has like the wildest spikes on the team, probably. So when he's good, he's really good, especially on defense. He's come along certainly as a playmaker. He's been put in some positions that he, will say, I just do what I'm told. I'm just happy to be used, whatever I'll do. That's clearly not like, yes, I love how they're using me, but he's doing well kind of with those things too. He's grown a lot on defense this year, but he's definitely one of those guys that I would have to imagine a lot of teams around the league are asking about.
Well, I bring him up as well as you brought up the big man lineup that they've been using. And like when I go to prepare for this, I try to make a chart of like everything the other team is top 5 in and bottom 5 in. Okay. Very rare bottom 5 and top 5 stings for the Wizards, which, like you said, might speak to how mid they might be this season. Yeah. However, it's hard not to notice like the boards. As far as that's concerned, the one thing that stands out is their top 10 in rebounding. And I'm sure that speaks to the lineup that they choose, but I couldn't help but notice last night, they have a guy that's got a nose for the ball as well. I'm curious. One of the things I'm curious about, if he is the backup center tomorrow night, is how he matches up with Hartenstein, how he matches up with some of the backup centers that the Knicks use. And obviously, if he goes against the centers as well. Any other thing that stands out to you in this matchup?
I will be interested to see, especially if these guys are shorthanded again. They almost certainly will be short. Not every single person is going to come back, but something I saw in the Bulls game and something that I think kind of kicked into gear after that OKC and Pels game they had at the end of last week and then on Monday this week is like, I haven't seen the fight that I saw in the Bulls game last night. I mean, they were diving for 50-50 balls. They were really, like you mentioned, the rebounds were a big thing last night. If they're shorthanded again, I think it could be a grittier team. They're going to want to knock off somebody like the Knicks. These are guys who are very like aware of their standings in the NBA generally. So beating somebody like a Bulls, somebody like a Knicks, they're pros. Like you said, they're trying to win every single game, but these are guys that also live up to the moment. So I'm kind of going to be interested if they're shorthanded to see how much more willing they are to do those things like the effort plays. And I sound like a coach now. That's dumb coach talk. But you know what I mean.
I get it. Believe me, I get it.
Yeah.
Should be interesting because the Knicks, it's been a weird season. The first month, really the first month, they were figuring things out. They have had multiple inflection points where it's like, oh, this is the thing that turns them into a tank. Oh, this is the thing that's going to get Thibodeau fired. There's a West Coast trip that's going to be terrible. They go 3-2 on it. There's a Mavericks game, a matinee game that Dolan speaks to the front office afterwards and is like, yep, this is, if they lose tomorrow, firings will happen. They go win 8 in a row. After that.
That kind of sounds like the Wizards, honestly. Like they've got a really good win against the Jazz. They got a really good win over Dallas without Porzingis, with Luka playing. And then they have that 10-game winning streak where you're just like, these people will never win a game again.
You mean losing streak?
Losing streak, yeah.
Which that would be very different if they had this random winning streak in the midst of all of it.
Like you mentioned, the tanking is on everybody's mind, and the Wizards are both not good enough to be a playoff team, and they're right in that 12 spot where they always are. It's really, it's like, I want someone smarter than me to like study the psychology of this organization from like an organizational standpoint, not a basketball team standpoint.
It's why from like the outside looking in, it's hard not to see like, oh, 6th on Tankathon, like I understand the temptation to just like, all right, Bradley Beal, you're shut down for the season. Porzingis, we're going to strategically play you when we can. It's also January. So I wonder if that's too early to pull the plug. But I guess we'll see. Last question before I let you go. Do you have I should have prepped you with this. Do you have a Fred Katz story? Because he's become a friend of our show. He's someone that's given us a lot of time. He's honestly low-key a contributor of Knicks Film School. We have him on once a month. We're big baseball fans, me and Fred, so we exchange Mets and Yankees texts all the time as well.
Oh, I'm so sorry for you on that. I've watched so many Yankees where like Fred's like, you want to hang out today? And I'm like, yeah, sure. He's like, okay, we have to watch the Yankees game though. I'm like, again? Okay.
Yes. Growing up I'm a Mets fan. So growing up in a Yankee house around Yankee fans, I appreciate the apologies. Would that make you a Nationals fan though?
I did grow up in that. Well, because when the team got here, I was in 4th grade or something. Okay. So yes, I am a Nats fan. Right. I told them when they hired me at the Post, I was like, just never make me cover baseball. 1, I'd like to enjoy the sport, and 2, I never want to go to a baseball clubhouse. Thank you.
Fair. Okay.
I feel like all of the Fred Katz stories I have are also Scott Brooks stories, because Fred Katz and Scott Brooks had the funniest, weirdest relationship. Like one time Fred got back from vacation on Italy or something, and I guess had put on some vacation weight or whatever, and Scott Brooks was just like, she's never gonna marry you now. And he was just like would just absolutely roast Fred, and only Fred for the weirdest things. And he knows all these stories and he loves Scott Brooks, but we'd all just be standing there like, holy shit. It was coach of the Washington Wizards, but what a crazy man.
Yeah, Fred had hinted to, didn't hint. He actually told us he went out to coffee with Scott Brooks a month or so ago, and we were just like, oh, you and Scott Brooks just don't hurt yourself when you pick up that name you dropped. But I guess that's again the nature of your industry.
Yes, it is. But Fred and Scott are different.
They're different. Okay.
They're built different. Yeah.
Gotcha. Ava, this was great. I look forward to this matchup. Obviously I'd look forward to it more if Porzingis plays, but again, it's the theme of the pod. The the Taj Gibson of it all actually is intriguing as well. But please share with everybody where people can find your work.
Sure. So I'm like probably the worst person on Twitter in the NBA, but that's fine. I'm Ava R. Wallace on Twitter. And then if you just Google Ava Wallace Washington Post, that's the easiest way to find our Wizards content. It's there on the Post Sports website, but it's buried because, not the highest priority we have. But I cover these guys all season long. So those are the two places.
But I got like a minute left. Can I actually ask you, what is the hierarchy of the Wizards? I've been fascinated by it. So I went to school in Virginia, and I had an idea of where the Wizards are.
Virginia, or like DC suburbs, Virginia?
The middle, central Virginia.
Okay,
we can talk about where I went to school when we sign off.
Cool.
But, I'm very below the DMV though.
So I think our sports page is interesting because our newspaper is very much like a national newspaper, and our sports page is still kind of like caught between like national brand, but we do cover all of the local sports, including all of the local colleges and everything like that. And our readership is very much like a local newspaper's readership. So it is, I imagine, like every local paper in the country, like NFL team, like top, it is Commanders all day, every day. Then I think it's Nats, then it's Caps, and the Caps have a very loyal, intense, like a small but loyal and intense
that's
fan
hockey.
base.
That's hockey.
Yes. Yeah. That's where it's like these people will live and die and comment on every single story, but there's not that many of them. And then there's the Wizards.
Okay.
Which is too bad because...
Does Georgetown supersede that at all?
Oh, no. The Wizards definitely of all of the basketball in the era, which is such a shame because DC is such a great basketball town. Like it's good grassroots. We've got great high school basketball. We've got a lot of guys in the league. But yeah, the Wizards, they are certainly not as connected to DC as there's opportunity for an NBA team to be connected in the city, and the Wizards have kind of fallen off.
Interesting. Yeah, that a weatherman from the ABC affiliate when I was living in Central VA, grew up in Arlington and was like a diehard Washington everything. And when I try to like talk trash to him, be like, like Melo went off against the Wizards tonight. He's like, bro, I haven't watched a Wizards game in years. And it was like, oh, okay. So just off of that, I was that very small vacuum of a perspective. I was, at least from him, be like, okay, so they're further down in the pecking order.
If this team gets good, there will be a ready and waiting diehard. And I don't want to like insult. There are a lot of diehard fans, but you see where they rank in attendance. The last time I checked, I have no idea what it is now, but I know towards the beginning of the season they were last in the league in attendance. And it's just a shame. But yeah, once this team gets good, the fan base is going to explode because there's a lot of good basketball people here.
Yeah. Nailed it about hockey, by the way. I've got
hockey people are crazy.
That it's like if there's an artist, like a musical act that doesn't have the biggest fan base, but damn it, if like the people at that concert are having the time of their lives,
living and dying, like it's really fun. Yeah,
exactly. Ava, this was great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.